We have been doing a three-part series. Part 1, we talked about the evolution of the hotel PBX. Part 2, we talked about cool stuff that new PBX platform is going to allow us to do, or does allow us to do now. And we are now at Part 3, SIP, SAS, and savings. So we'll cover what each of those is, and especially the savings, of course, which is part of the most interesting aspect of this, I'm sure, to most hoteliers. We won't go necessarily in this order, but we will cover all those things. And again, just a quick recap. We've spent the first webinar scratching our heads wondering why, since we haven't seen an old-style all-in-one digital proprietary word processor since the 1980s, why do we still see proprietary digital phone systems today, since they're proprietary and closed, and a software application in the word processing world can do so much more. Usually, and it's platform independent. You load it on any kind of computer you want, and it gives you more options and more features. So why in the world are we still doing these closed digital proprietary PBX systems, especially since companies like ours with VoiceWare and others now have these server-based IP PBX applications that, again, do more and theoretically cost less. The second webinar, we looked at cool stuff. And under cool stuff, among the many things we looked at were the guest's native language, the ability for this new system to speak to guests in their native language, also the mobile guest room phone app, which is basically the ability to have a guest's mobile device register as though it was the guest room phone and make communicating within a hotel, especially a luxury hotel, very, very simple. And then finally, in terms of the neat features at the hotel, is the browser-based console. You get rid of that clunky old console, and you have a very powerful and much less expensive tool available at multiple stations to have a 360-degree view of the phone system settings for all guests and admin positions. And then outside of the hotel, with this new technology, through a knock monitoring platform like this, or a knock monitoring location like this, we can monitor thousands of hotels with just a few staff, and always be aware of how healthy a phone system is. And that is just 4 of the I don't know, we touched on 10 or more really cool things that the new platform will give us. So now we are here at Part 3, SIP, SAS, or cloud and savings. And we're going to talk about the all SIP hotel solution, so looking at a 100% SIP hotel and what that looks like, and there's a problem involved here. We're going to talk about practical use of SIP in hotels, so we'll get rid of that problem and see how SIP is really being used in hotels now, what can be done today. Then look at software or the solution as a service, SaaS. SaaS is software as a service, but I'm calling it solution as a service because you view it and we view it as the entire PBX that's being served up as a service. And we'll look at savings as we go along the way. Here's the all SIP hotel. And I'm going to get my pointer out here, but just show you that in this all SIP solution, through the internet, we're getting only SIP trunks, no standard trunks. We have something like VoiceWare as an application driving through the LAN, the existing LAN, all the guest room phones over here on the right-hand side and the upper right side, admin phones in the center bottom, and then interfacing to the property management system. And here's the problem with this solution. All these SIP guest room phones today cost quite a bit more than their equivalent analog version. And so just the purchase price of the phone may be 4 or 5 times as much as an analog phone. So the cost drives up there, and you get rid of the savings that you might have otherwise experienced with all SIP. The second thing that is a problem here is that because these are all SIP phones, you need a separate software license per phone. So if you have 2 or 3 phones in the room, they're all different extensions. You can't put them all on the same extension number, and you have to do some finagling in the setup to get them to look like they're all the same extension number. And configuration of a phone, what we call provisioning of a phone, can take up to a half an hour per phone if the phone is being a little bit persnickety, which many of them are today. So you can burn many man-hours just getting a phone set up. Ongoing, that's also a pain because you can no longer just take a phone and replace a non-working phone in a guest room with a working new phone because it has to be provisioned first. It won't work unless you provision it first. In other words, unless you program that phone so it knows what room number it is. Now, notice here there is no PBX cabinet in this solution. That is the hopeful main area of savings for the all-SIP hotel. What I'm here to tell you right now is that we're not there yet. We will be someday, I believe, but right now it is just much more expensive to do it this way than it is to use some of the traditional technology. And the great compromise here is to have a VoIP-based hotel solution like the ones shown on the screen now, using the same server serving up a VoIP-based solution, and probably still using SIP phones in the admin location here on the bottom center. But now up on the right side and through these gateways, we're going to drive standard analog guest room phones. So we're still going to drive analog guest room phones because they're inexpensive, they're easy to provision. You can put 1, 2, 3, even 4 phones per room without having to do any kind of magic or buy additional licenses. So it's sort of the best of both worlds. And this is the predominant solution we see today, whether this is an FXS gateway array in here that we're going to talk about in a second, or some type of still proprietary solution. So there's the promise versus the reality of SIP in the hotel today. It is more cost-effective than going all SIP, for now at least. And again, I believe that eventually we will see the solution work itself out so that it does become all SIP. But for now, this is the way that that most systems are being installed. Let's do a quick cost comparison now, understanding that the solution we're going to look at is basically a VoIP server or some kind of a proprietary server, and we're going to look at the Mitel SX200 ICP with their AX controller versus non-proprietary using various SIP vendors for the hardware. And here is a Mitel AX cabinet, a little bit grainy here, but this cabinet plus the server that's built into it, it goes for about $3,000 list price. That includes 0 of these ports. These cards are driving guest room phone ports. For 0 ports, it's about $3,000, and the equivalent in the non-proprietary hardware is just a server, a simple server, and that can cost between $500 and $3,000. For our example, we're just going to say $1,500 gets you a pretty decent, powerful server to drive the hotel. So there's obviously cost savings right there right away. On the proprietary hardware, going back to the Mitel AX cabinet, you need to stuff it full of 24-port cards, and you can only buy these Mitel cards. And for those of you who know Mitel, I've got the wrong card here, but for purpose of this example, you can see that you need 1 card for 24 ports, and they're about $850 list price per card. On the non-proprietary hardware side, you can buy any of a variety of different gateways. This is a 24-port Grand Stream. Gateways list between $600 and $1,000 for a 24-port solution. This one happens to be on the low end of that at around $600, so we'll use that in our price comparison. But note that you can buy 24-port gateways, but you can also buy a 16-port gateway, an 8-port gateway, and they now even have 48-port gateways out there that are very cost-effective. So the savings can be even more, especially if you just need 2 or 3 more stations than an even 24 count number comes to. On the proprietary side, again, going back to the Mitel proprietary hardware, this is a Mitel phone that lists at about $250. If you use the Mitel controller, you must use Mitel phones in most admin locations to get all the features. Not true in the non-proprietary, and here's a nice Yealink phone. Non-proprietary SIP phones list for between $100 and $400 predominantly. This one happens to be about $150, and it's a very nice model. I happen to be talking to you off of this phone right now. We do use those in our office. And finally, let's look at that console at the front desk. In the proprietary hardware world, again, looking at the Mitel AX, the list price on this console is about $1,900, but even solutions that we make that are proprietary, the console is still around $1,300, $1,400, $1,500. So that's a pretty big price tag for just that one answering position, and back into the non-proprietary world where you're using a SIP or a VoIP-based PBX solution. We showed you this browser-based console, but this plus one admin phone does much more than the console and is priced way less. In fact, you get a couple of these licenses free in our package, add on a $150 phone, and you're way under that $1,900. And you can duplicate this at 3 or 4 locations. That's quite a bit of savings over needing, say, 2 or 3 of these monsters at $1,900 a piece. Okay, so let's look at some actual numbers. I've just done a quick little spreadsheet here, and in the proprietary column, we've got that $3,000 server. One of the things we didn't address, oops, sorry about that. One of the things we didn't address in the discussion we just made was the software and licenses, and actually in this example, the non-proprietary software and licenses is a bit higher than the proprietary. One of the reasons for that is that Mitel in this example is getting your money through their software and the hardware combined, so they're looking at that as a total take. The non-proprietary, well, the software company has to get all of their money all at once, so that is the one item that's a little bit more expensive in the non-proprietary column. But the net total here, if you look at $18,290 versus $14,950, the savings there is about $3,500, or about 20% of the purchase price is saved just in the hardware and software licenses alone. Please note, in this example, I've just thrown in $3,500 on both of them for other equipment and installation and incidentals. This is an example. It is not meant to be a complete system. I'm not saying you can go get a Mitel AX controller for 100 rooms for $18,000, but it's in the ballpark. So there's your first area of savings that SIP offers. It's just in the equipment price alone. The second area of savings and the second topic we want to talk about was software as a service, or the hosted solution model. And what is this? Well, this is taking the IP PBX, and instead of putting it on a server in the property, you're hosting it in the cloud. It becomes a monthly service fee, like your high-speed internet access service fee or your cable service fee that you pay per month forever. So it is a monthly payment. It's not a lease. It is a true monthly payment. The neat thing about it is that anytime the software gets upgraded, that just happens like magic and for free. You don't have to wait while someone comes out and does an upgrade. You don't have any downtime, theoretically, and you get all the upgrades for free just as part of being on the hosted solution. There is no hardware, at least in terms of the server on site, that you need to take care of or worry about. There's hardware involved, sure, but it's up in the cloud and someone else is taking care of it. So as we said, the server that is driving it is located up in the cloud. And if we look back at the same example we just used, looking at the non-proprietary hardware side over here on the right, what providing the software as a service does is it takes these first two lines, the server and the software licenses, and it takes them out of the equation of what you have to purchase up front and makes them a monthly service. So again, this is an example only, but this looks like to me about $7,400 in our example is removed from the upfront purchase price. So about half of the cost goes away, at least on an upfront basis. A typical cost per room per month for providing your hospitality PBX as a SaaS solution is about $2 per room per month. That equals, in this 100-room example, $200 a month, $2,400 a year. You get to break even if you can just compare dollars per dollars and don't account for time in there anywhere at about 3 years, $7,400 versus $2,400 a year. It's right about 3 years. Obviously, 3 years isn't very long, but again, you are getting all of the upgrades and you're not having to take care of it. It's sort of like a built-in warranty. So what this provides is a lower entry cost, and what we've done is we've converted about $7,400 of what would normally be capital expenditure money into operational expenses or OPEX dollars. And a lot of hotels are being intrigued by this today, but if you're one of those hotels who are looking at this, please do your analysis, because most of the hosted solution providers try to get you to look at only 5 years. Well, when's the last time your phone system only lasted 5 years? It is really a longer view that you need to look at it. And keep in mind, you can't ever stop paying this monthly fee or your phone system stops working. All of that gear that you have purchased to drive the phones is useless without something driving it. And unless you're prepared to switch to a premise-based server, like in the early example, you're going to be paying forever. So keep that in mind. It does have potential savings, especially if you're strapped for cash at the time you want to convert. Okay, there's another area for savings that we haven't talked about yet, and that is maintenance. Remember from our examples that the hardware costs are a lot less expensive on the non-proprietary side than the proprietary side. And as a result, obviously, if you need to replace something or fix something or upgrade something, the costs should remain slower to do that. But keep in mind also that the proprietary equipment over time gets discontinued, and Mitel and all manufacturers will do this over time. They're going to discontinue one model in favor of their newer model, and so the parts become harder to get, and you may get into a situation where your system can no longer be used at all because you can't find the one part that it needs. As a result, obviously, you've got to, instead of getting maybe 15, 20 years out of that system, you may only get 10 years out of it, and you have to replace it because you just can't get parts. And finally, on the non-proprietary side, as time goes on, you can remember there are many manufacturers for each of those hardware components you need to buy. You can always get a newer version of some of the non-proprietary equivalent gear if the actual model you purchased the first time isn't available. You don't have to replace it with the same model. You can change manufacturers, and you can even change the modernity, if you will, of the equipment. All right, the last thing we want to look at here, I think, is SIP trunking. SIP trunking has a lot of promise. SIP trunking is the ability to make your phone calls over the Internet or largely over the Internet and save money doing so, kind of like Skype or VoIP, but it's provided as a connection into your hotel phone system or your PBX that looks exactly to your PBX, looks exactly like regular phone lines. It just sends the call out of your PBX here when the call is made through the Internet, through your high-speed Internet access provider, through the Internet, all the way down to as close to the destination as it can get, and then that last little bit goes out the regular public switched telephone network. And how does that save you money? Well, even though you don't require an IP PBX to do this, it makes it easier to have one, but it rides on top of your existing high-speed Internet access, and that's important because it does use up some of the bandwidth. But what it's doing is it is not requiring that you have lines from the phone company. That price gets cut about in half for the lines per line, and your long-distance costs go about in half and sometimes can go to even zero depending on the SIP trunking provider you choose. So you can save quite a bit of money using SIP trunking. The question you have to answer is, am I ready to trust all of my inbound and outbound phone calls to riding over my high-speed Internet access onto the Internet and going out the Internet through the SIP trunking provider, routing to where it needs to go? If you're ready to do that, and we're doing that here and doing a lot of testing, if you're ready to do that, you can save quite a bit of money. Bursting saves even more. What is bursting? Well, let's just say your chain requires that your little 100-room hotel have 15 trunks. That's way too many. Everybody today knows that, but your chain might require it. With bursting, what you can do is pay for, say, 8 or 10 trunks, the number you really need, and bursting will allow you to exceed the number of actual purchased trunks by some percentage, maybe 50%, as long as it only happens every so often. So 10 trunks could work as 15 trunks. Even though you've only purchased 10, it will allow you to use 15 SIP trunks, meaning 15 simultaneous SIP calls into and out of the property if you have bursting enabled, and yet you're only paying for 10 trunks. And that's another cool feature that SIP trunking allows. So that was pretty quick, but it covered at least the high points of all of the different ways in which you can save money using SIP, using SAS, and using SIP trunking. Any questions? It looks like we've got a number of questions. So the first question here is, why are people still buying proprietary systems? That's a really good question because people still are buying proprietary systems. And the answer is actually pretty simple. The number one answer is it's their habit, right? Everyone's always just bought Mitel for their hotel or buys just PhoneSuite proprietary. But it also is pretty simple. You may be spending more money, but you buy a box. Everything's in that box. It's designed to work in your hotel. You put everything in the box and you plug it in and play. I think over time you're going to see the non-proprietary solutions like our VoiceWare solution begin to be just as simple to install and use. In fact, once it's installed and operating, our VoiceWare is just as simple and more powerful. Question number 2, does the mobile solution for guests, similar to twinning, where it will take additional trunks to dial into the mobile? That's a good question. And no, the mobile device is actually going to register against that premise-based or hosted SIP server as though it were another SIP device within that solution. So no, you don't need additional trunks. The mobile is not going to be connected through the mobile number, but rather through a SIP client on the mobile that registers itself to that SIP server like VoiceWare. In slide 2, I'm wondering where was the SIP trunking provider. Slide 2 did not have a SIP trunking provider. There are a lot of people who, majority of our customers, in fact, today in that slide, and I can run back to it if you want to see it, but that are still using analog trunks. And there was an analog trunk provider going into the VoiceWare server in that slide. So you could do SIP or analog there, but we switched it up quite a bit, not just the guest room phones, but the trunking as well. John, I hope that answers your question. And the last question, do you have an annual software assurance cost, and what is the typical cost? Can we purchase multiple years in advance? Yes, we do. We operate through resellers largely, and we do offer through our resellers an annual software assurance. There's a year of it included, and we will also offer our NOC monitoring, although many of our resellers offer their own NOC monitoring, and that cost varies. Can you purchase multiple years in advance? I don't see why not. We normally do it as it's a monthly fee billed quarterly or annually because it's a small amount. But Betty Ann, certainly call us or call your rep here, and we can go over that with you. Okay, thank you all for coming.